Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Christ our God, as we prepare to journey with you towards your holy passion, crucifixion, resurrection, we ask that you strengthen us as we are in this unprecedented time of not being able to be physically together and as church. Strengthen us, and we ask that you work through our presenters in our meeting, President Pat, George, and all those in attendance, and all those who are ministering to your flock, that we may continue to connect with those who are searching for you and who desire to grow closer to you in your holy church, and continue to bless our medical professionals, our first responders, all those who are on the front lines ministering to those who have this virus, who are in a vulnerable situation. Keep them in your care. Heal those who have the virus, and may you grant eternal repose to those who have passed on, and comfort to their families and loved ones. We ask for all these things in your holy name, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
So I'll do a brief introduction. Many of you who are familiar with the Metropolis of San Francisco, we are so blessed to have a family wellness ministry. And George, Papageorge is the director. You're a licensed marriage and family therapist in the Bay Area. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Presbyter Pat is, I don't know if it's co-director, assistant director, but you do a lot of the communications and social media for the family wellness ministry. They have an awesome team throughout the Metropolis, and we're so blessed to have you. And you've done a lot of retreats and produced a lot of material in this last year. And part of the reason that I wanted to invite you, I mean, it's always good to hear what the family wellness ministry can offer us, but one of the reasons I was really thinking about you over this past month is because we just had our Metropolis clergy lady, and we talked a lot about how we're created for connection. And then all of a sudden, it just felt like the rug was pulled out from under us, you know, as we went back to our parishes ready to connect even more deeply, and we entered a new reality. So I was hoping that, you know, reflecting on these last few weeks, you could kind of guide us in exploring, you know, how we can still be connected, and how we can still fulfill that, you know, we're still created for connection. That hasn't changed. So how do we fulfill that? So please help us out here.
Great. Awesome. Well, yeah, for Pres Pat and I, and Pres knows that whenever we speak, we could be jumping in back and forth. So I encourage that. And then Father Vasily's on the call, although I'm not sure if he visibly just disappeared. So I'm not sure if he's still there. I know he's having connection issues, but Father Vasily's also on the family wellness team. But I would say to the whole group here, I'd look forward to you guys jumping in as you need to. I want to start, if I may, just with a couple of thoughts, and just get us, in a way, get us connected. And even the idea of talking about the topic of connection, sometimes we even leapfrog over getting ourselves connected in order to learn about connection. And so when we think about creating for connection, there's this one memory I have of, in fact, Father Tom Hopko told the story about an interview that he saw with Mother Teresa being interviewed. And in this interview, the interviewer was going on in describing so much of what Mother Teresa had accomplished in her lifetime. And that interviewer, you know, was going on about the hospitals and the orphans and you know, all of that. And it was, you know, and people were being inspired by what was being described. And Mother Teresa kind of humbly sat there, and the interviewer asked the question, you know, how is it that you have your lifetime and we have our lifetime, and yet our lives end up so different? How is it that you do so much, and in comparison, we don't come close to that? And Mother Teresa said, very, you know, in her cute way, the only difference between you and I, And she kind of spoke slowly, and you're kind of waiting for sort of this punchline, if you will. The only difference between you and I, she said, and it came down to one word, she said, is distraction. And so from her perspective, that idea that a life with less distraction makes a lot of things possible, and maybe even what we perceive as impossible things possible, because we would think it's impossible for me to be a Mother Teresa or something like that. And yet, what happens if we go in our personal equation, my life minus distraction, right? So I just want us to start with that idea, like, because here we are, and you guys can, reflect as well as anybody on just making, kind of furthering this point that now that we have globally our world, minus distraction, my life with less distraction, your life with less distraction, what is it that starts happening? So I want us just to sit with that for a second, and then say, I almost want that to be a running undercurrent. Now, I had a funny conversation with my sister the other day, and I'm talking to her on the phone. We're totally close. And I said, "Oh, Paula, you wouldn't even believe it, what has happened." And she goes, "What?" And I said, "You've got to see my fingernails." She goes, "What?" And I go, "You got to see my fingernails." And she laughed like crazy. And it turned out her adult son had made the same observation. And that is, I have not had full-grown fingernails for 20 or 30 years. And when I bite them, I don't consciously do it. I don't plan on doing it. But in my very multitasking life that I think I'm just so great at the cost of my fingernails. And then we'd say, what else do I bite at in my busy life, right? What else is allowed to grow in my personal equation minus distraction? So I'm celebrating my fingernails, whoop, whoop, right? But it gets me thinking, it's like, wow, I think there's a lot of things that are growing that I never would have anticipated. And even in my own awareness or lack of awareness, like I wouldn't have had the awareness of what I do when I'm all wound up. Well, what else am I not aware of? Who else do I interrupt? Or what conversation don't I have? Or how come I just notice what one of my kids isn't doing versus what they are doing, or whatever that is in the world of awareness, minus distraction, what starts to grow. So I feel like, in a funny way, my fingernails are my pathway to Mother Teresa, like it's my little image. I mean, it sounds goofy, but it's my little image of like, because I would have humanly said, it's not possible for me to stop this weird little habit I have. Right? So I want us to, saying all that, sit with some self-reflection on what's going on for me, what's possible for me, minus distraction. And then we can start looking at our family members and looking through that lens, like what starts maybe growing in their life minus distraction. I have had interesting interaction with my clients, some of whom are stressed out teenagers. And among my most stressed out teenagers, I've never seen them smile so much as they have the last 3 weeks.
Wow.
And now my non-stressed out teenagers, they're going a little wonky. They're going a little cuckoo. But the ones who really know stress and really know anxiety are really describing, I've never felt lighter like this in a long time. Because basically what they're telling me is my life minus distraction, or my simpler life, makes more sense to me. Something feels better. I don't feel the piano on my back. So very interesting. And literally these kids' faces, I mean, they almost didn't have to tell me. In essence, it's their fingernail. It's their growth that becomes evident, even if they're not totally consciously aware of it. So I want us to start with that. Now, with the topic of creative for connection, which is the same topic in family wellness we use for our marriage workshop that we're, have been doing this past year and be launching when we can in the future. And it is a great it's a great set of words that go together, kind of theologically, psychologically, physically, relationally. It says everything. There's a lot of theology and there's a lot of psychology in that we're created for connection. And if we're created for that and we're not getting sufficient amount of that, then we start having symptoms. So, and I was joking with Pres Pat that, when Papageorge talks, one way or the other, there's a few words he's always going to bring up. One of them is connection, and one of them is boundaries. And I want us just to pause on that for a second, just to say connection and boundaries. And I think this is a good self-reflection point, and to ask ourselves, how do I do connection typically? And then we could run the equation minus distraction and maybe make some observations. And then how do I do boundaries? So here we're sheltered in place, and we'd say, in what does that do to connection? What does that do to boundaries? And so in some ways, it creates some advantage. And then in other ways, and my kids are 17 and 22, so I'm experiencing the advantage. If they were 4 and 6, I might be experiencing something that feels different than advantage. It still probably is advantage, but it can get all to say, I think there's beauty to these concepts of connection and boundaries. And then we'd say, just mental health wise and spiritual health, how do I do connection? How do I do boundaries? And then given shelter in place, what does that do to these concepts of connection and boundaries? And what's it do to my way of doing connection and boundaries? A thought that kind of another little memory that came to mind was in 1984, I took my first job, moved away from home, done with college. Everything I owned was in a little Volkswagen Bug, moved across the bay. What was ever on the other side of the bridge, I found out, and moved there and took a job, went to B of A, opened a checking account. And something happened that year in that bank account that I didn't know the concept. And that was, they gave me overdraft protection. I think it was new to me. I don't know if it was new to the banking world, but the way they did it was they gave you a bank account, they gave you a credit card, and every time you overdrew your checking account, they just put it as a charge of $50 at a time on your credit card. Mm-hmm. And in my early 20s, it was a car wreck moving in slow motion. And that was, I thought it was great. I never had to balance my checkbook.
Wow.
And yet I found out the hard way that I had this massive pile of debt accruing. And it was a lot easier to activate the overdraft than it was to pay it off. Now, why do I say that? I think that life minus distraction, let me put it this way. Life with distraction, I think, is that B of A account. I think life with distraction ends up being our overdraft that makes us think everything's okay and that we don't have to really pay attention to our accounts. And that later on we could pay attention to something. And I think that life minus distraction might actually be the point I came to with that B of A account. And that was, wow, I actually have to look at connection and the reality of it and how I do it or don't do it. I actually have to look at the reality of how does our family work when it comes to boundaries? And is the way I do boundaries at all workable for the people around me? So, and in the mental health world, I think people are kind of discovering that whatever is, and this shelter in place, in a way, just sort of pulls the covers off, if you will, just reveals like where we're at. The beauty of that, particularly I think for us during Lent, is that's all of St. Ephraim's prayer where it is I really want to see what is going on here. It really is the what we know to be the culture of Great Lent is self-reflection. So I just want to share a little bit of that, that less distraction is meant to lead to stillness. Less distraction is meant to lead us to our heart.
And George, I think one of the things that needs to also be recognized is under these circumstances, some parents who have young children who have never ever even engaged in the whole idea of homeschooling or having to educate their children, and then being responsible to actually continue to work a full-time job and to continue to try to maintain some sort of a healthy family spiritual life on top of all of this. It's extremely difficult. And a lot of families that I have spoken with in the last few days feel overwhelmed.
Yep.
They're on top of each other.
Yep.
They're trying to balance getting the homework done and having some assembling of connection and time together as families. And I think I read the best advice from a mom who said, if I could do a redo in life, I would not be so pushing my children academically so much as I just would be with them and be connected with them and take walks with them and find ways to explore things that we're both interested in. And I'm realizing this is really taking that task to task. Mm-hmm. That idea of how difficult it is for some of our families right now in the stress of the unknown, the stress of a lot of demands of work and family. And I think that's also something that needs to be recognized, that the distractions for some are so heavy.
Yes, that's a great point. And we get reminded that this period of time is different things to different people.
Exactly.
Right. And we respect that, and kind of in the spirit of empathy, that we'd recognize that what might feel, pretty good for one person may be, for the same reasons, really awful for another person. Right. And we stay in tune with that within the community. And I think in the spirit of that, we could also say, if we're kind of organizing around Created for Connection, we still have the challenge of, if connection is our organizing principle, mm-hmm. then even in the scenarios that are even extra layered with these new challenges, will connection still win by the end of the day?
Yes.
And so it really does prompt us to get out of autopilot. And I think we all have gotten out of autopilot, whether we like it or not, but that's the mindful life. That's the spiritual life, is getting out of the autopilot of the world and getting mindful around, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And in how I just did it cultivate connection? And as some of you know, when I give parenting talks, I make that point. But it's not just for parents, it's for our marriages too, and for our relationships. And that is, whatever I do and how I do it, it had the power to cultivate connection or not. So it's not just the task I did, it's the manner in which I did it. So there's some of those decisions we're making as far as, what do we fit into a day? And for those that feel overloaded, we still have to look at, what's the big stuff, what's the small stuff. And when I don't get it all in, and I'd say this is part of the covers being ripped off a little bit on this, is, if, for those who are type A, what's sheltered in place mean to us? For those who are extroverts, for those who are introverts, for those of us who are perfectionists, for those who have anxiety. Now, I would even say, if connection, and I think it is a holy calling, right? Because we'd have, the whole incarnation of Christ, all around, that connection was a priority for God. Holy Monday and Tuesday, just the whole bridegroom, like that reconnecting with our first love is a big deal. That's all around connection. So I think we'd theologically agree connection is what we want to organize it around. I think psychologically we'd say, we could watch videotapes of the poor little monkeys with little wire mesh mothers, in the cages, that they've done all those awful experiments to say those poor little monkeys, don't live very long when they don't have that connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a proper organizing principle, but I want us to keep in mind something in the mental health world that comes up all the time, and that is what's in my control and what's not in my control. And I think a lot of people can go through almost a lifetime and look back and say, I put a lot of my effort stressing over what wasn't in my control, and it drained my tank. So I didn't have anything in my tank to actually do something good with what was in my control. So I want us to think about that kind of in our sheltered in place world, and whatever multiple kids are doing and what we're getting done in a day, and what it is we even see as our most important goals of all those goals.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue of control, that again becomes a self-reflection thing to say, wow, do I find security in making sure everything's in my control? Am I going to learn how to let go of certain things? One of the things, another therapy word that's common and understandably, is the word obsess. So all this pandemic stuff is happening, and as you know, and some of us turn off the news because it's too much, and some of us can't get enough of it for some reason or whatever it is. All to say, there's a lot going on right now for all of us at the same time. That's not the same as obsessing. So I want us to keep that in mind. If we obsess over something, it becomes enormous. So we're facing a challenge. Our families are facing a challenge. Our relationships are, in this altered state. Our church life is very different. But I want us to keep in mind, if we obsess over parts of it, it means we're making the challenge actually bigger than it has to be. So obsessing would be the same as overthinking. And so when we overthink, something's going to get activated in our body. In our mind, what's going to get activated is fear, right? We overthink, activates the emotion of fear, which it activates a hormone called cortisol, which then makes us less likely to connect, less present, and we're sort of out of the game. So I just want us to note that, because we're going to get challenged over the challenge, over like what am I not getting done? And oh my gosh, this is getting hard, or whatever. All that's true, and not to minimize any of it. But I do want us to keep in mind, if we're prone toward overthinking, and we usually get prone toward overthinking when we have a new challenge that we're still adjusting to. But I don't want us to fall victim to obsessing, because then we give the enemy a foothold for us to be driven by fear. And when we're driven by fear, we're not mindful at all. And we're not mindful, and we're not very present. We're not present, we're not going to connect. So I think there's some sort of little therapy in place we all could be doing over just being aware of what's going on in our bodies and how we're processing stress. And back to control, that we're letting go of the things we can't control, and we're celebrating the things we can control.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, just to play off of that point, we can control that we're going to do a a jigsaw puzzle, an hour a day, let's just say, or something is therapeutic for you or for some family members. We want to keep in mind, like, what are those things we can connect to that helps our family be connected, that's within our control, so we don't get defined by all these things that are out of our control. So what are thoughts going on for you guys as you're hearing me share a couple of these ideas?
I'll pop in here for a little bit, George. Good to see you,
right on.
By the way.
Same.
So we've got 5 kids at home. 4 of them are normally in school, and the 3-year-old. And so President and I are both going a little bit bonkers, trying to homeschool and run a daily house. And we're going kind of cuckoo, but the kids are actually doing really, really well. They seem happier and less stressed, and they're young, so there's not a lot of stress, not like teenagers, but one teenager. They seem less stressed, happier, and seem to be doing just fine, not going to school.
Yeah.
Not having quite as much structure in their day. And I was wondering why, how come we're struggling and they're doing really well? I thought, well, we could probably learn from them because they're connecting. They're connecting with each other in ways that they don't get to because they're divided up in school. And here at home, they're all together, they're playing together, doing really, really well. And just being connected makes us feel comfortable, right? At ease, and we're happier. So I'm learning from them that if I can just learn to be, like they are, and just delight and have joy in whatever is around me in my life there, then I will be more at ease and have less stress and just be happier in general. So they're teaching us rather than the other way around right now.
Nice. What are other thoughts or even comments on that? Anyone else?
Well, I also was good.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Just say if anybody wants to comment on connection and or what's going on kind of in your household around all this.
I was just going to say there is kind of a difficulty in wherever you are, and there's joys and there's beautiful things that you're going to experience, but there's also really difficult things that we're going through. And one of the things that is kind of one of the things Thomaida asked us to share a little bit about was, from a church perspective, how do you move into like holding the grief of what's happening and also what's going on in our home life and in our church life. And so when we hope that the church home is going to be sufficient and beautiful and loving, and it's a place where your families can connect, and like you said, Father Vasily, your children are less stressed because of it, and it's a beautiful thing, and that kind of shows to the health and wellness of your family. But then there's also the other aspect that we're all dealing with, and that's the church community, in which we don't have physical contact with. We don't have the connection that we're so used to thriving, especially during Holy Week and Pascha, and all of a sudden that's taken away from us.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important thing to really think strategically. How are we making those connections? How are we reaching out to those people who are single? How are we reaching out to our people who are alone and older and not connected? And let's say from the presbytera, who is a fixer, who always wants to help things, I have had a very difficult time with this idea after I ordered from Amazon little bags and ready to give our palms and our Holy Week books and our lamentations and icons of the bridegroom. And I was gearing up last week to like, how are we going to reach everybody? And how are we make that connection? Because it's so important, because these are people that I love and this is my family. And then I was on the last Zoom conference with Thomaida and Father Steve saying, can you believe people were actually thinking that you could put things in people's trunks and drive away? And I'm like, that's exactly what I was thinking. And so it's really a struggle to navigate the grief of not being able to be connected as a church community. It's very much of a struggle for me to not be able to actually fix something, because yes, we can online stream services, which has been a huge blessing, but it's also very hard to find a way that our people can be bound together like they have been in the past, through Holy Week and Pascha. So anyway, just wanting to acknowledge the difficulty of that and recognize that we are so created in a church community for connection, and there is no other better time than we feel and experience that than Holy Week and Easter. And we pray together, we walk the journey together, and then we celebrate together, and we eat together, and we do everything in preparation for that glorious Pascha. And it is a very hollowing, difficult place to be. And I think one of the things that we have realized is just doing a small little video with our community. We did like a little Facebook Live thing. I had it turned the wrong way and everything else, and everybody's probably like looking at it like this. But we were able to just say, this is hard. We're going to be walking you through this. Also to say that we have a plan, and you are going to be able to receive a Holy Week book if you haven't gotten it. We are going to send out what the guidelines are. We're gonna have an awesome party after it's all over, to give people that recognition that we're not just letting it all skip away, and we're going to be there with you in this difficult time. So anyway, I just think it's important to kind of address some of those things, as well as what's happening in the family and then what's happening in the church family, because we have so many different needs, and they're all coming in from all sides. And our goal in all of this is be connected with Christ ultimately, and to find a place that we can be in that stillness and that peace, like George was talking about. And if we can find ways to gear people towards that, glory to God, right? So anyway, just wanted to put that piece in there.
No, that's helpful. And I think too, when you mention about, when we get to that point and, all come together and have our pareja when that time comes. I know we're saying that my daughter's not going to have a college graduation because of this. And so we're saying, well, when we do, college graduation 2.0, however we do that, we'll do it, whatever. And so we think about that. I want us to, I think it could be useful for us even to have as our own personal exercise, and maybe even a family discussion, which would be, when this is all said and done and you look back, what are you going to be happy you did? Or what are you going to be happy that you realized at the time? Or what, and that could be a sobering little exercise, because built into it is just imagining when this is all said and done and you look back, what are you going to be bummed about that you didn't do or didn't realize, right? And so we have to keep in mind that if whatever parts of this are stressful, it can trigger us into more survival mode. And survival mode is designed to survive, but it isn't designed to be a living person. It shuts us down more than wakes us up. So so whichever way we need to reflect on that, but when we think about when it's all said and done and we look back, it can be, God, I'm glad we did those puzzles, or I'm glad we created this new little tradition. We were joking at home that, like Taco Tuesday, but for my wife and I, maybe Tequila Thursday, however we look back, saying, I'm glad we got kind of silly and came up with that idea, or I'm glad we let that go, that whatever it is that we used to stress about, or that we're doing a different recipe from a different country, because we kind of have time to look at cookbooks, whatever it is, to just that could be, I think it could be a pretty good reflection. One of my least favorite emotions is regret. It just destroys me, So to try to bypass regret, that's where I build in these little exercises in my own brain saying, when it's all said and done, what do I want to look back on? So it almost can help me not regret more than I have to.
Yeah, and even with Holy Week, we tend to say to our parishioners, we get 1 week out of the year to do this. So let's do it right? Let's be participants and be part of it. And I think one of the issues that happens now is that we're flooding people with information. Holy Week, this is what you can do. Dye your eggs, make your sureki, have this beautiful door filled with all these lovely ideas about celebrating Holy Week. And we become a little bit anxious about trying to be the Pinterest mom or the Pinterest dad and putting all these fun things into action and making it exciting. And then we forget the stillness, or we forget the fact that, like, one of our traditions all throughout Holy Week is we just put a black shroud over our TV. Well, now the black shroud that was our TV is live streaming our services, right? But that's what we're going to use it for. And that kind of piece of being overwhelmed with the idea of overproducing or wanting to make it perfect and wanting to do the best we can, I think we need to be cautious about trying to overdo something that could just be simple. And finally, when you can just let it go and go, we're not going to fix this, but we're just going to make it the best we can for our beautiful little family, then glory to God. So if your eggs don't get dyed and you actually boil brown eggs and you do Christos Anesti, glory to God for the brown eggs that you're being able to tsingrisi. Yeah. Whatever we can do to make this a beautiful and joyous experience for our kids, I think it's worth doing that, but not to stress over it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. A couple things come to mind too, in terms of simplicity, and that is just one thought that I had bumped into a few years ago with my kids is the icon of descent into Hades or the resurrection or whatever, and right, do I have that right? He's pulling Adam and Eve out of the grave. Depending on which icon you have at home, if you zoom in, and I've shared this with Pres Pat, if you zoom in on the wrists, the part where Jesus is pulling them up, I think that's powerful. And we think about our family life and church life that's kind of been reduced. Sometimes if it gets reduced, maybe we're going to actually see something. And so it was powerful in my life where, because that icon is where, we do our prayers and stuff. And sometimes I'll just be looking at it. And some years ago, I just saw those wrists and the feeling of when you see Adam and Eve's wrists being kind of pulled out of the grave. And so I showed that to my kids, and I had them just like lay down, and I pull them up by I wanted them to get the feeling of what it feels like to be pulled up by the wrists. And ask them, what's that feel like? Like, you can't get out of there. What's it feel like when I pull you up? So just even that one little part of the icon to me becomes a portal that as a family we could travel through and maybe have a little interaction, not only illustrating, wow, look what the Lord did for us. He pulled us out where we couldn't get out of. If we're thinking about how do we have language in our family, say mom or dad or husband or wife or whatever, I'm stuck. Someone needs to pull me up. Like, to me, that could be kind of a cool Holy Week moment, as well as a family way of understanding each other, all within one little centimeter of that icon. So that for me, that was meaningful, whatever, but it's just an idea to illustrate that we're really aware of what we are not going to be doing this Pascha and all. But I do wonder if we can discover what it is that we end up doing that ends up being like concentrated with a lot of powerful, almost like a less is more, but that it really is more, a little more personal, a little more creative, a little less autopilot. What's your impression of that when it comes to this sort of reduced reality that we're in, and yet maybe a portal into something more?
Well, I think personally about the portal into something more is that we are going to plan and be very specific with our parishes about what our plans are after Pascha and how we're going to proceed in that journey together as community, in book studies, in maybe a big parade, in a party, whatever that is. We're kind of pulling ourselves into that hope that after this ends, we're still intact. And we also have to do that with our kids, that you might not get your 8th grade graduation, but you still have those friends. So how are you going to connect with them? Yeah. You're not going to be able to go on your vacation you've been planning to Greece because IV is not happening this year. How are you going to consider what that's going to look like for your kid in the month of July? There's a lot of disappointment, and we need to kind of address those things in not try to fix them, but just try to love on that and try to also make plans to make things a little bit more normalized when things get back to real life. Thomaida, what are your thoughts about this?
So I think that's really helpful. I mean, I'm putting a lot of comments in the chat just because I'm nervous about my internet connection. But I think that, you know, what's really important is the communication is really key. And what you said, Pres Pat, like, I think, you know, making that video, people seeing the reassuring face, like in the families, the singles, the elderly, hearing from you, because you don't have to have the answers in order to create a meaningful connection, or, you know, as a parish, you don't have to speak only when you have the answers, but in order to just hear, like I've called some of the parishioners at my own parish one-on-one, the ones that live actually closest to me, we're kind of splitting some things up geographically that way. And it's been so rewarding and great to have those calls, because each one is, you know, this one's working reduced hours, but, you know, her company is able to pay them for their full-time work. And so she's just expressing how she's grateful and ready to help others. And then someone else is, you know, a little bit, they have, you know, some anxiety, some concerns, and like, how long are we going to have to do this? And, you know, so everybody's like in a different situation, and just being able to hear that and talk with one another is really helpful. Because I think we need that as our parish. Like, the parish has been a focal point for so many of our families. And so we need our parish to continue to be there for us, I guess, and continue to connect with us and allow us to grieve the things. Like early on, George, you were saying like people are experiencing this differently. And I know that the first couple days I was on Instagram and everybody's talking about all the crafts they're going to do. And I'm like thinking, yes, me too. And then I go, wait a minute, it's Monday morning. I have a job. Like what, you know, like I got trapped by like all of these people who are normally at home or staying at home, and or moms that are organizing crafts for their kids. And I started thinking about that I was in that reality, whereas my reality is different. And I still have a stay-at-home job that I need to continue working. And so it's just, I think it's been really interesting to be sensitive to what others are going through. Other people are healthcare workers. Other people are dying alone right now. And, you know, being sensitive of that kind of global catastrophe, but also staying true to the responsibilities that we have, you know.
And one thing that I feel has been super helpful for our family and our church family is that we have asked our parish council people to split up the list of people and let's make calls and connect. And my husband is every day 10, 15 people that he's calling. And that connection is so good and it's so important. And so if I had to give any advice to a priest, I'd be like, make 10 calls a day, make 10 calls a day, because that makes that such a difference in the lives of your people. Mm-hmm. And then just to reach out to your neighbors. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we rarely get sunshine in Seattle in April, and we have had sun every day this week. So we go out for our cafe and we have our little card playing games, and we have 3:00 cafe. And we go outside and we have met so many beautiful people walking their dogs, having that connection with our neighbors. And we're putting together a little sing-along, and, you know, those kind of things that bring your neighborhood together can be beautiful and long-lasting. There are a lot of blessings in all this.
Yeah, I think that's what is the reminder on that little reflection I was talking about, is that just that we don't miss it. And if we in our own way get still enough as kind of a regular reflection ongoing every day or whatever on, you know, what is it that I don't want to miss? And I do think that this opens up just possibilities that our busyness would not have allowed. It just, we had different eyes. We see differently now. I mean, when you see another human person, it's like exciting. It's like a pareja right there with, wow, another person, you know, hello. Oh, and I feel so good. I said hello to someone, you know, like there's a, you know, it's almost like you know how the Bible talks about our secret heart. Mm-hmm. I think in some ways God is answering the prayers of our secret heart. And I'm not saying I'm throwing theology in there that, you know, he causes pandemics. I'm not getting weird that way. I'm just saying God is so amazing that he finds ways to hear the prayers of that deep heart, of our secret heart. And I think somewhere in the prayer of our secret heart, it has something to do with not sweating the small stuff, has something to do with, I want to truly connect. I want to authentically connect. Yeah. I want to be a light in the world. I don't want to just be on autopilot and then whatever, and then wake up one day going, what was that all about? Like, so and Father Pete's on the call, and we've been doing a lot with family wellness out there in Stockton and having a blast out there. And, talk about a rug being pulled out and then, and then it stops. And yet we're thankful that we got as much done. But I'm telling you, I already know for Stockton and for so many of us, I think family wellness ministry is forever changed for the better at some kind of deeper way of like family and wellness. Okay, that's not just a department title. Like we're wishing wellness on everyone we encounter right now. We're going to be having eyes to see, I think, more deeply the importance of how we understand our wellness and how we care about somebody else's wellness, and what we're going to be jumping into. Like, we're going to be, I think, flocking to any opportunity we have for family wellness or family connection or, community connection. So,
and even the word wellness, George, I just was looking at this. Think about it. W-E, illness, wellness. If you put it just an I in front of it, it's illness.
Wow.
Like we have to be connected in that we.
Wow. Whoa. That's a podcast right there. I like
there
that.
You go. One of the things I did share with you guys on the link is I put together some resources for Holy Week. I've been looking for good opportunities for families to go through something simple if they want to kind of walk through that. So it's on our link. And also Father Steve Saklis did an awesome job putting together some videos. So I've included that. And I've also done these chant-alongs where I've put these videos up so people can learn the Holy Week hymns and just replay them. So that's up there as well. I know we're kind of running down on time, but I just want to share that resource with you all. And just, this is an opportunity for us in a big way to make some, life-changing decisions in our family lives and in our parish lives. And the appreciation that we have in that piece of it is so big. We really have learned to appreciate, like, when you get taken out of the system and you all of a sudden don't get that beautiful Holy Week and Pascha, you realize how much you love your church and depend on it. So this can be a beautiful gift to us to recognize.
I think also generationally, I know I have with my 17-year-old at home, and he's a pretty expert on his PS4 video games and all that. And you accidentally treat technology as like the unwanted stranger in your home, or, oh, that technology is ruining our kids. And, that's other talk. But in some ways it's bridging the gap to where I know for that younger generation, they're saying, see, technology is pretty awesome, isn't it? Because we're all like relying on it right now. So I think I think we need to high five our kids in whatever ways we can on, thank you for enlightening me. We're now truly in community, whatever. So I think there's playful ways that we can be connecting even with what before was differences in our family.
And one other thing that we are doing now is we're doing like a story time deal where we're reading a book to all of our kids on a Zoom, because the parents are kind of connecting, whether a Bible study or a women's group or whatever, on their Zoom, but we really are starting to put a connection with our kids. So just having story time, and we set it together. That's been a really neat thing. We did it last week, and we'll have another one tomorrow. So,
let me say, and I got to jump into a session here pretty soon, but if I can mention a couple of things. One is, and you guys really mentioned it earlier about being aware of what other people are going through, and that call and all that kind of thing, is the power of being with someone. And now many of us, just our immediate family we're with, and then extended family and friends, we're looking for ways to be with them. I just think that actually will end up saving us as parents and as spouses and as community members. And that is the power of truly being with someone actually isn't reliant on being physically there and isn't reliant on having any solution for them. I just want us to almost marinate in the, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
So if my daughter is lamenting over what her life is like because she's not in Boulder, Colorado with all her friends, doing what would have been a blast for her final semester of college, I can't fix that. But boy, oh boy, the way I've been with her has gone up a notch. Mm-hmm. So I think, and similar to what Pres Pat was saying about grieving, I think we're very aware of what isn't. And sometimes we get stuck on what isn't and we miss what is.
Right.
Right. And in fact, there's a great book out there called Love What Is. And a lot of marriage dilemma is that we go through years of thinking we're going to fix our spouse and point out what isn't happening. And we miss what is and who they actually are and how we could connect with who they are. And I think that's true just across the board, even in our communities and with each other. So just the power of with, which I think is very incarnational. Emmanuel, God with us. The other thing I just want to mention, only because in my family, and I know that I'm the youngest of 5, and us babies, we just turned 60 last week, actually a week ago on April Fool's Day. So I'm connected with all my siblings. I'm connecting with my siblings every day for the last 3 weeks. I don't normally connect with my siblings every day, but we're on our little, text thing, group texting. So I'm very well aware. I'm thanking God for the way connection can happen in ways that just wouldn't have occurred. But I want to just mention, I think of my siblings, there's this one, how there's different Jesus movies out there, and some of them are like horrendously cheesy.
Yes.
And right. And people might have different tastes on what's cheesy, what's not. The Jesus movie that is like the Jesus movie of the Papageorge 5 of us kids that we've loved is the one that was made, I think it's in the 1970s, I think. Anyway, it's called Jesus of Nazareth. We love it. In fact, the girl that plays Virgin Mary is the actress that played Juliet in Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. And I think Zeffirelli was Italian producer or whatever, was part of this Jesus of Nazareth. Every star you've ever seen in Hollywood is in this Jesus of Nazareth movie. Anyway, I go on about that. You can tell I like that movie. Anyway, just a thought is, I think the movie's well done, whatever. Maybe a little Hollywood-ish, and Jesus has blue eyes, whatever. But I think he's a cool Jesus, and I'm up for a cool Jesus. All right. So I mentioned that to say, for family life, if you download that or whatever, if you can find clips that is Holy Thursday. You can find clips that's Good Friday, right? You can find clips in the Garden of Gethsemane. I think that would just be its own cool, hey, you guys, I want to show you this clip. What do you guys think? And we can have our own Holy Week that still has the sights and sounds feel in our own home. We can cut flowers on Good Friday and adorn something.
Yep.
And then watch that clip and have a feeling of what he went through. So I'm just throwing that out there to say, I want our creativity to fire up. And I think we find creativity in our heart, but we don't find our heart when we're on autopilot. And we might have done Holy Week this year, as much as it would have been awesome. Maybe we would have been on autopilot. And maybe God has blessed us in turning off autopilot. We're driving manually, and maybe that's going to be the best thing we could have ever prayed for in our secret and deep heart. So
I love that.
Yeah. So I think I have a client. Yeah, I have a client waiting. I need to get going. Thank you for the invitation. Hey, if we can rally like this again, I'm totally up for it. So just let me know. Blessings to all of you. Family wellness to all of you. Oh, and if you notice, I'm not shaving. So by the end of shelter in place, Father Pete and Father Vasily is going to conjure me, and I'm going to be Papageorge. And I'll be ready for it. So
it looks great, George. Thank you so much for coming.
Love you guys.